Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This isn't, gross negligence by certain individuals. This is the whole of the organization that needs to look at this.
A WorkSafeBC report on the tragic death of a young firefighter last year finds safety failures before she was killed. Plus, dozens of seniors and people living with disabilities are forced from their homes by an early morning fire in Kitsilano. And
today is a very good day for the people of Abbotsford, for everybody who is dependent on Highway 1.
The BC government pledges billions of dollars more to expand the Trans-Canada Highway through a swath of the Fraser Valley.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. We start in the BC interior, where a WorkSafe report on the death of a firefighter last summer found safety failures beforehand. Devon Gale was killed after a burning tree fell on her near Revelstoke last July. The CBC's Brady Strachan has our top story.
The death of Devon Gale sent a shockwave through the province. Just 19 years old, Gale was already in her third season with the BC Wildfire Service. Last summer, friends and family members mourned her loss at a memorial service.
She was a light. Nobody met Devon without loving her. You were instantly drawn to her beautiful, sweet, pure energy.
It was attended by Premier David Eby and hundreds of her fellow wildland firefighters. Now, details have emerged about what led up to Gale's death and, more importantly, what didn't happen with regards to safety protocols around danger trees. A WorkSafeBC report says Gale was using a chainsaw to cut a log on the forest floor when a burning cedar tree fell and killed her. 2 other firefighters were injured trying to save her. The report lays out the missed safety steps prior to Gale's death, including that firefighters brought up concerns to their supervisor about the burning tree, but despite this, the burning cedar was not assessed, and instead workers were told to use a heads-up approach to the burning cedar and stay away from it if they were uncomfortable working around it. The report finds there were several young or new firefighters on the crew, but there was no documentation they received the required young and new worker health and safety orientation or new recruit boot camp training before being deployed to this fire. The report also finds the BC Wildfire Service is aware of the safety concerns around dangerous trees, but the normalization of risk has been justified within the Wildfire Service's culture, and safety procedures are not being followed as a result. The BC Wildfire Service has responded to the report. David Greer leads the organization.
This isn't, gross negligence by certain individuals. This is a whole of this is the whole of the organization that needs to look at this and do the right thing.
On Wednesday, Premier David Eby said he's directing the Wildfire Service to implement the report's recommendations.
It was a commitment that I made to Devon's family, was that this death of a remarkable woman with all the potential in the world would not be in vain.
The union that represents provincial firefighters says the report shows the high level of burnout at the BC Wildfire Service. It says the high turnover means firefighters have to work long hours in extreme conditions, an issue, it says, that needs to be addressed to make working conditions safer for all firefighters. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
It was a scary night for several seniors and people living with disabilities in a housing complex in Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. They had to flee their building after a fire broke out early in the morning. As Yasmin Khanea reports, it's not yet clear if and when they can return home.
Residents say they were awoken by the sounds of screaming as flames scorched multiple units. Fire officials say all 38 people living in the building had to flee. 8 people were taken to hospital.
First crews on scene found a suite on the 2nd floor that was fully involved and had already transitioned to the 3rd floor through an open window.
The deputy fire chief says while the investigation is still ongoing, it appears the fire started on a couch on the 2nd floor and that the man who lives in the suite is a smoker. He says the elderly man suffered smoke inhalation and burns.
We've had extensive damage to the fire suite of origin as well as the fire above. Unfortunately, the door to the suite was left open into the hallway, and the fire spread significantly into the second floor hallway.
The building, owned by BC Housing, offers affordable housing to seniors and those living with disabilities. Residents are being allowed limited re-entry to recover items, but fire officials say the building is uninhabitable, with gas and power shut down. As they wait to see when they can return, displaced residents are being provided short-term accommodation, food and clothing by the Vancouver Emergency Management Agency. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Vancouver.
A warning for you, this next story contains disturbing details. There is still a lot of uncertainty surrounding the death of a 5-week-old Indigenous infant in our province. The baby was under the care of BC's Ministry of Children and Family Development. Its mother says social workers took the baby from her shortly after he was born due to suspicion of drug use. Now his parents are pressing the government for answers. They claim the grounds on which the province took their child were biased.
The fact that Indigenous parents are more likely to be subject to these type of notifications / birth alerts is problematic and continues to perpetuate the systemic problems where Indigenous families are not able to stay together, and the government is intervening and taking these families apart.
In a statement to CBC News, BC's Minister of Children, Grace Lohr, says she cannot publicly comment on this case in order to maintain confidentiality. BC's lumber industry is bracing for another hit as the U.S. nearly doubles its duty on Canadian softwood lumber. It had been charging roughly 8%. Now it's spiking to almost 15%. The head of BC's Lumber Trades Council calls that move disappointing.
BC is a high-cost producer. We're facing a number of challenges, and this is just adding to the cost of shipping lumber to the U.S. So it's going to impact production. It's going to impact workers and communities that depend on the forest sector.
BC's Forests Minister calls the rise in softwood lumber duties unfair and unwarranted. He says the province, along with Ottawa, will challenge the move. Meanwhile, the U.S. Lumber Coalition is calling Canadian practices unfair, claiming this country subsidizes and dumps its softwood lumber south of the border. 5 BC men have now been charged in what Mounties are calling a drug superlab bust in Maple Ridge and Coquitlam. Officers seized almost 50 kilos of MDMA, also known as ecstasy. They say the lab contained chemicals to produce 80 kilos more.
The number of vessels that were present, they could have potentially produced 40 kilograms of MDMA every 48 hours if they were continuously running. So that gives you an idea of the scale of these super labs.
The investigation started in 2022 after 4 search warrants. Mounties identified multiple people and properties involved. Along with the drugs, a Mercedes SUV, a Tesla, and more than $50,000 in cash were also seized. The BC SPCA says it has seized 32 Pomeranian puppies and dogs from an irresponsible breeder in Vernon. Their words, they found the dogs in an unsanitary and unventilated garage. CBC News spoke with the agency about how they investigated.
We received a concern from a member of the public who had purchased a puppy from a breeder in Vernon. And unfortunately, the puppy soon became really ill. She immediately took it to a vet, and unfortunately, it passed away. The puppy, it was determined that the puppy had presented with the parvovirus. Our officers attended, and when we attended, there were a number of concerns, and the owner surrendered 4 puppies to us. Unfortunately, 2 of these puppies didn't make it. They died of this parvovirus. Our animal protection officers applied for and was successful in obtaining a warrant to search. We attended the property, and as a result, 32 dogs, including puppies, were removed from the home. All the dogs were kept in a garage. They were separated into different pens. There was very little bedding. There was some sawdust or shavings on the floor. Diarrhea was present. The food and water containers were contaminated with flies and wasps. there was no stimulation for them, nothing. This is such a heartbreaking case because we're really keeping our fingers crossed that all these dogs will pull through. And if there's enough evidence there, our animal protection officers will, in all likelihood, recommend charges to Crown Counsel.
A former BC Liberal leadership candidate has left the rebranded BC United to join the BC Conservatives. Gavin Dew unsuccessfully challenged Kevin Falcon for the Liberal leadership in 2022. Now he's slamming Falcon's tenure and plans to run for the Tories in Kelowna Mission.
What I had seen is unfortunately the party that I was a part of had really just was falling apart at the seams. And unfortunately, it is Kevin's leadership that has run BC United into the ground.
Dew also wrote a scathing opinion piece in the National Post in which he claims, quote, Kevin Falcon took the wheel of a vehicle that once won races, insisted he knew a shortcut, and drove off a cliff. Dew, his wife, and 2 young children moved to Kelowna last year. A former BC MP who served the Fraser Valley for almost 20 years has died.
Full speed ahead and damn the torpedoes.
The family of Chuck Strahl says he died on Tuesday in Chilliwack after a courageous and exemplary battle with mesothelioma, a type of lung cancer. After working in the family logging business, Strahl ran and won a riding in the Fraser Valley in 1993 with the then Reform Party. He served until 2011 under the Canadian Alliance and Conservative banners and was Federal Minister of Transport, Agriculture, and then Indian Affairs. Strahl later chaired the committee that oversees Canada's spy agency, CSIS, but stepped down amid questions about his work as a lobbyist for a pipeline company. His son, Mark, who won Strahl's seat after he retired, says his dad's deep Christian faith was at the heart of who he was. Chuck Strahl leaves behind his wife, Debbie, 4 kids, and 13 grandchildren. He was 67. Housing, healthcare, and education. Those are just some of the key issues a new report from BC's Human Rights Commissioner highlights as having the greatest human rights impacts for British Columbians.
The systemic inequalities highlighted in this report impact all of us, but disproportionately harm those who are marginalized in our society. The 10 issue areas that are described here are not experienced in isolation. Many residents of BC experience violations of their human rights in multiple areas of life, in ways that intersect and compound the harm that they're experiencing.
Govender says unaffordable, inaccessible, and inappropriate housing tops the list for human rights issues in BC. The Premier is pledging more relief for drivers who rely on Highway 1 in the Fraser Valley. David Eby is rolling out more money to expand the Trans-Canada in Abbotsford.
It will ease commutes by car, it will ease commutes by transit, and it will ease the shipment of goods right across this country on the Trans-Canada Highway.
Eby says the province will spend more than $2.6 billion to widen Highway 1 between Mount Lehman and Highway 11. The project will include a dedicated HOV lane and bus-on-shoulder sections. Eby acknowledges concerns about the pace and rising costs of highway improvements.
I feel the frustration of everybody who sits in traffic, who wants to be moving faster to get this road open as quickly as possible. That's what I want to. And a couple of pieces make that more challenging. First of all, the volume of traffic that's on this road means we can't do all of this work at the same time. We have to do it in phases.
He also points to the 2021 floods and inflation of construction materials as factors in that delay. The overall project will see the highway expanded through the Sumas Prairie in Abbotsford toward Chilliwack. Construction is expected to start in 2026 with completion by 2031. To BC's wildfires now. As of the afternoon, there are 400 active blazes burning in the province, 4 of them considered of note, with the destructive blaze still hitting communities in the Kootenays. The BC Wildfire Service says rain is expected soon, bringing much-needed moisture to the area. It says showers will likely arrive on the Rocky Mountain Trench in the northeast and in the southeast fire center. For now, almost 40% of active fires are said to be out of control. Over 100 of those are burning in the Southeast Fire Center, with more than 60 in the Kamloops Center. Darius Madavi joins us now with a first look at the weather and what's going on there with the fires.
A little bit of good news. A lot less lightning activity today. We just had this pop up sort of northeast of Kamloops, but other than that, fairly calm across the province. We did have the expectation of some more thunderstorm activity up in the northeast, which didn't quite pan out. We got a little bit of rain in a few places, but not much. But also no lightning. So a little bit of good news there. We had that severe thunderstorm watch in place for the Northeast earlier today, but it was dropped about an hour ago now. So again, a bit of a calmer day for once. It has been very active in terms of the lightning activity. Tomorrow also looks a little bit more calm. We don't have any areas where we're expecting any really elevated risk of thunderstorm activity. Also in the south and up in the Northeast, we do have a chance of convective activity of some storms, but nowhere where we're seeing that real risk of some severe activity. Now, for mostly the western parts of the province, we do still have elevated fire danger. It might be some rain coming to some of these areas up and down the coast over the next few days, so maybe we'll see a little bit of relief in terms of the fire danger as well, but I wouldn't count on seeing too much. For now, there doesn't seem to be too significant of a rainfall. Maybe this weekend, overnight Saturday into Sunday in a few places, but generally we're still going to be fairly dry, although we may have a decent input for at least a few hours that night. In terms of the smoke, it's mostly haze at the or it will be mostly haze tomorrow. We are seeing some surface smoke in a few areas, lots of air quality advisories still in place, but tomorrow we are seeing a little bit less surface smoke in many areas, so a little bit of relief there. In terms of conditions tonight, we do have a little bit of precipitation possible in a few places, but generally just some cloud in most spots, Dan. And tonight in Vancouver, also, once again, just a little bit of cloud, and it might be a little bit cloudier at times late tomorrow morning, but then we should clear up for the afternoon.
Okay, we'll check in later. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
It was an accidental discovery, but now UBC researchers have created a new super black material. Darius will tell you what it could be used for after the break. Researchers at UBC have created a new super black material. It absorbs almost all light and could improve things like telescopes, optical devices, and consumer goods. Our science and climate specialist Darius Madavi went to find out more.
At first glance, this may look like a regular watch, but if you look closely at the face, you'll see almost nothing. And that's what makes it so exciting. Underneath the glass is a brand new material that absorbs over 99% of all visible light. This is Nixilon, the first ultra-black wood, and researchers here at UBC are going to show us how to make it.
This black isn't like a pigment black, it's called a structural black. It's just based on that, it's based on the structure of the wood. You walk through a forest and you see a bunch of tall trees, and you don't, sometimes if it's like a, like a really dense forest of all these mishmash of bushes, you don't see the light coming through. So that's what's happening.
Super black materials have a reflectance generally agreed to be below 1%. So it means 99% of all of the light within a defined wavelength range is absorbed by the material.
So hardly any visible light actually escapes.
Ultraviolet and visible light.
All right, this is our plasma reactor here, and we're going to load it in right now. So it creates like a plasma, which is kind of like a gas. So it hits that surface of the wood. First it causes chemical changes, but also plasma etching. It removes the surface of the wood. Once we're done, we release the air. And then once the air is back to the room pressure, the door will open, and we'll open it right here. And then this is when I take the sample out.
Ooh, smelly.
Yes, so this is what it looks like. Wow. There is actually a white layer on and that's like the fragments of the plasma etching. This is when we go into the room hood and we use air to clean the surface up a bit.
Wow. What was the accidental discovery?
Well, the accidental discovery is interesting. We started off this work some years ago hoping to use high energy plasmas to literally machine the wood surface to improve the water resistance of the surface. And then I said to Kenny, my graduate student, who's done all the work, we should look at different surfaces of wood. Normally you use a surface like this, which is the side grain, but I said, why don't we look at some end grain material? So this is the direction in which the water flows in the tree.
Right.
And so Kenny did those experiments and brought a sample like this into my office, and I said, wow, that's black. In fact, that's super black.
So what sets this apart from other ultra black materials?
It's made from sustainable material. So one basswood tree could produce 200,000 watch faces, or close to 1 million gemstones. No mining involved, just a natural material, easy to treat, cheap. Darius, we're shining a cell phone light through this Nixilon gemstone. Wow. And you can see the wood structure there. So you can see the pores that conduct the water in the tree. You can see the growth ring. We came up with this name. It's a mixture. Nyx is the Greek goddess of darkness, and Xylon is the Greek name for wood. So we combined them to create the name Nixilon. We were the first people to make a super black material from wood.
All of these are so cool. Thank you so much for showing us. But one last question. When can I get this one in the store?
Well, Darius, you're top of the waiting list.
Oh.
So as soon as we make another one.
9 days after Ukraine launched a surprise attack on Russia, it's still advancing. We take you across the world next. 9 days have now passed since Ukraine launched its surprise attack on Russia, and it is still advancing. Since Ukrainian forces crossed into Russia's Kursk region last week, efforts to push them back have so far appeared to have failed. Chris Reyes shows us where this incursion and the reaction to it could go next.
In this video released by Ukrainian forces, soldiers are seen marching through a border village in Kursk, showing they're holding on to Russian territory for another day, more than a week now since launching a surprise incursion. In a briefing with his army chief, President Volodymyr Zelensky telling the world he's pouring more into the fight. If there's a way to reinforce troops, please pay attention to it, he said. Zelensky also discussed the possibility of establishing military checkpoints in the areas it claims to control, dozens of towns and villages, potentially useful bargaining chips.
Rather than trading land for peace, they can trade land for land. And I think that would sort of be a definite benefit to the Ukrainian side.
Ukraine could also be trying to strain Russian resources while encouraging their citizens to keep fighting, says this political scientist.
The strategy so far has been very successful. It has boosted morale within Ukraine. It has caused confusion and paralysis within Russia's decision-making.
Russia has released its own video to bolster claims it's regaining control of the border. Officials say they've shot down more than 100 Ukrainian drones. This latest shift in the conflict comes as Ukraine signals it wants Russia to attend a peace summit in November. But this Russian lawmaker and former intelligence agent accused Ukraine of derailing negotiations.
This is not diplomacy, this is terrorism.
Putin has called Ukraine's incursion a provocation.
We've seen in these 2.5 years that his strategy is outlasting the West and Ukraine rather than destroying the world in order to win.
Russia claims that fighting off Ukraine's troops has not strained their resources, all while Zelensky is hailing early success. In his latest public address, Zelensky declared Kyiv is achieving its strategic goal. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
The war with Russia continues to take its toll in Ukraine, even though it has not been attacked directly in weeks. Airstrikes hit a children's hospital in Kyiv last month, destroying the dialysis unit. 2 young patients who were getting treatment on Canadian-donated dialysis machines survived that attack, but as the CBC's Ithel Musa explains, their futures are more uncertain than ever.
Oksana Fomenyuk's 16-year-old daughter, Solomia, was undergoing life-saving dialysis treatment when the Akhmedet hospital in Kyiv was struck by a missile in July. She survived, but the entire dialysis unit in Ukraine's largest children's hospital was destroyed. The machine that Solomia had been using was donated by the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. Nowhere is safe in Ukraine, says Fomenyuk, not in the shelters, not in a children's hospital. 2 adults were killed, including 1 doctor, and hundreds of people were injured in the attack. The Kremlin denies being behind it. But the United Nations says there's a high likelihood it was one of Russia's missiles. The hospital is now trying to repair the damage.
Imagine we as Canadians, as Torontonians, lose the ability to have, sick kids. God forbid this would ever happen in Canada, but it's like losing this whole entire institution.
The Canada-Ukraine Foundation helped send 17 dialysis machines to Ukraine in 2022. It's now trying to raise $1 million to help the Children's Hospital secure much-needed equipment.
The urgency is real to help Ukrainians.
Fomenyuk agrees. Her daughter Solomia was admitted to the pediatric hospital in May 2022 after kidney failure, and she needs dialysis 3 times a week for 5 hours. We'd be very grateful for help, says Fomenyuk. The sooner the kids can get dialysis, the better. It's essential. The Akhmedet hospital says it's continuing to provide care to Ukraine's sickest children, despite the challenges of a brutal war. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Fresh peace talks are underway in Geneva aimed at ending the war in Sudan, though neither side has yet shown up to take part. As the CBC's Margaret Evans reports, about 15,000 people have been killed in the 16-month-long conflict, and an estimated 10 million have been forced to flee.
The ill winds plaguing Sudan show no sign of abating. Famine declared by independent experts in a camp for the displaced called Zamzam 2 weeks ago, home to hundreds of thousands who fled fighting in El Fasher, capital of North Darfur. And now, torrential rains and flooding across Sudan, adding yet another layer of misery onto people enduring a 16th month of brutal civil war. We need water, food, healthcare, says Duria Abdulrahman, and for God to lift this curse from Sudan. Nothing more than that. Sudan's warring generals won't do it. The Sudanese armed forces declined to attend U.S.-led peace talks in Geneva. Their rebel opponents, the Rapid Support Forces, sent a delegation but left its ultimate participation up in the air. Action for Sudan! Demonstrators calling for a ceasefire were disappointed.
These are their maneuvers to gain power, to gain points. But this will have to stop. The Sudanese people have suffered enough.
Regional neighbors are accused of taking sides, making diplomacy difficult.
Currently, there is no real leverage on the table that could help persuade SAF and the RSF, were they to come to the table, to put down their weapons.
Both warring parties have been accused of atrocities, including using hunger and rape as weapons of war. An estimated 10 million people have been driven from their homes.
There are people who have been not once, not twice, not thrice, but sometimes 4 times displaced as the war's front line has sort of followed them into relatively safe areas.
And in the face of it, the international community has appeared impotent, unable to lift the curse. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Prices for the online platform Patreon could soon be in for a dramatic spike, with Apple getting set to enforce a 30% fee for in-app purchases. Anise Dari now with why subscribers will likely be the ones paying the bill.
Tech giant Apple wants a share of the monthly fees subscribers pay to content creators using an app called Patreon. Apple's demand, 30%.
I might have a bunch of people who are coming to me through the Apple app, which means I'll have to raise my rates to be able to compensate for that difference, because now Apple's going to be taking a cut of that Patreon.
The fee applies to in-app purchases as of November 4th. Patreon says payments for existing memberships aren't affected. Podcasters like Craig Baird aren't sure how much it'll hurt yet.
It kind of feels like the Apple cost is just being transferred right to me rather than Patreon taking any kind of part of that or trying to compensate for it.
If you don't have an iPhone, you don't have the App Store.
The 30% figure isn't new, applying to most revenue from other apps for years. It's unclear what changed for Patreon, which avoided it. Apple didn't respond to requests for comment, but Apple won recent legal challenges to the fee, and the iPhone market is huge. So experts say companies have to go along with it.
App developers, software companies, platforms like Patreon live in fear that they have to stay on the right side of Apple's line or risk having their business decimated.
We don't have any other choice. App developers don't have any other choice other than to sort of pay these taxes, as you might call them, to the platform owners.
The fee can be avoided if users pay on a computer or Android device. But in a statement, Patreon told CBC News it's not permitted to advise fans away from purchasing within the iOS app. And the company is advising its users to increase their rates.
Norman McLaren.
In the end, creators will have to decide on their own if they want to eat the loss or raise prices. Anise Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
Still to come, the Republicans have a new plan of attack against the Democrats in the U.S. presidential election. That story after this. Most Canadians know summer is peak mosquito season. But as Jocelyn Sheppel reports, in Ottawa, public health officials are using drones and other new tools to target the pesky insects and help prevent West Nile virus.
Equipped for takeoff, the mosquito-killing drone is ready. Filled with larvicide, the large machine takes flight. Richard Trudell, a scientific advisor, oversees the drone operation.
They can hold larger quantity of larvicide. So like this one, I think it's 25 kilograms that you can put larvicide in the tank.
He says it's best suited for large bodies of water and harder to reach areas.
The pilot just needs to start the machine, and the machine knows exactly where it needs to go. And depending on the span of the spraying, because it sprays, I think it's about 20 feet wide. So the machine knows after the next line, they know where it goes.
Their work isn't just in the sky and river, but on the ground as well, even by bike. It's all part of a West Nile virus prevention program, led by Alison Samuel, who says the larvicide they use is safe.
They are known to be environmentally friendly, so not expected to affect your pets or humans or even the bodies of water that are treated with these products. So definitely products that we use are approved.
Tufik Sirhan lives nearby. He says the mosquitoes have been so bad his kids had to be taken to the hospital.
Mosquitoes is a really bad obstacle for everybody to go outside. We can't even enjoy our parking sitting there. We can't enjoy even go inside the backyard or playing the field basketball. But in the summertime, we can't even enjoy it because of the mosquitoes.
Just outside his yard, the West Nile prevention team tests the water basin by his home for the virus. He hopes this drone operation will help. Jocelyn Chappelle, CBC News, Ottawa.
To the U.S. presidential election now, where Republicans are opening up a new front in their attacks against the Democrats. As the CBC's Susan Ormiston reports, Donald Trump and running mate J.D. Vance are looking to use the Biden administration's green energy policy as a wedge issue against Kamala Harris.
J.D. Vance, the Republican hopeful for vice president, grew up in this house in Middletown, Ohio, an industrial city built on steel, which has gone Republican in the last 2 elections at least. And according to Judy Murray, it's going to stay that way.
He's a hometown boy, and I think he's going to help Trump tremendously. He's just what we need. We need this up and go, guys.
Vance used to be anti-Trump and more sensitive to the issue of climate change, but since his rise in the Republican Party, he's become more of a climate skeptic, parroting Donald Trump's invocation to drill, baby, drill, use more oil and gas resources, and calling Biden's big climate and infrastructure bill a Green New Scam.
We need a leader who rejects Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's Green New Scam and fights to bring back our great American factories.
Here's the twist, though. This steel plant in Middletown, Ohio, is in line to get $500 million from that same climate and infrastructure bill, creating hundreds of new jobs and making this plant more competitive by switching out an old blast furnace for 2 cleaner electrical ones. But many people we've spoken to here don't connect cleaner industry with more jobs, and certainly don't connect the Democrats to that. They're more interested in the cost of living and worried about inflation.
I don't feel like anything's gotten better in the last 3.5 years. Everything's gotten worse.
So the climate fight in this election will be about jobs and how much America is going to invest in clean energy. And that's where J.D. Vance and his Democrat opponent, Tim Walz, are far apart. Susan Ormiston, CBC News in Middletown, Ohio.
Ernesto is now a Category 1 hurricane after dumping torrential rain and knocking out power across Puerto Rico tonight. The storm is now turning north into the open Atlantic and is expected to strengthen again into a possible Category 3. The Canadian Hurricane Centre says it ought to be south of Nova Scotia by Monday, though it's too early to say what the impacts there might be. Let's bring in Darius Madavi now with a BC-wide forecast, what's up?
Well, a quick question for you, Dan, before we go on to the weather. What does this look like to you?
Creatures at a beach, waterfront.
Yeah.
Falls
pretty
Creek.
close. Yeah. So our producer, Matthew McFarlane, was camping for the last few days up in northern BC. And this is taken just northwest of Smithers in a place called Ross Lake. And it is known for this. These are western toads. They are just coming out of the lake. Here they are as tadpoles, which is a little bit difficult to make out because they're moving very quickly. But in the still version, you can see all the little tadpoles. Like, we're talking thousands, millions of these tadpoles and these toads, little baby toads coming out of the water. And you can see them here. Some of them half formed, so they still have tails, but some of them have feet. Just an adorable sight. And Matthew showed me this video earlier today, and I thought I need to share this because it is it's awesome. Now, let's turn to the weather. We've got some more rain on the way for a few places, but generally speaking, it is coming with some lightning, especially for the southeast and the northeastern parts of the province, and there is a risk around Prince George as well of that lightning. Now, some more precipitation may come for the coast, as we talked about earlier this hour, in a few places, and overnight Saturday into Sunday, it may come here to the lower mainland, particularly for some parts of Metro Vancouver. We could see I mean, we haven't really gotten any rain recently, but the most rain we've gotten in a while, a decent amount of rain, probably in the high single digits to low double digits, into the teens maybe. That is far from certain at this point. It is up in the air, but it does seem like we may get some rain that night. So a little bit of good news there in terms of the drought situation, especially for parts of the coast. In terms of those temperatures, they are staying relatively seasonal, I'd say. We're talking maybe a couple degrees below or above normal in parts of the south, but southern interior, but here on the coast, just about where we'd usually be this time of year, but might feel a little bit cooler with the cloud, although the humidity is coming back, so be ready for that. We have this low pressure system continuing to make its way down the coast. It is going to be sitting off the coast of Vancouver Island and be sitting there for a while, so we're going to get that cloud and we're going to get some of the other effects of that, those cooler temperatures and some rain as well. So that's going to be sitting there for a while. We've got this ridge over the prairies and it might keep it in place for a while. Hard to say exactly how long at this point, but it does seem like we'll be getting some sunshine in there as well. Across the province tomorrow, still a risk of lightning in a few places. It's still some rain as well. Over on the island, we'll get some cloud as well at times, but it should be clearing out. We should get some sunshine even on the west coast of the island at times. And here in Vancouver, Dan, we do have a few cloudy periods over the next few days, but also some sunshine. And we've got some humidity on Thursday and Saturday, but feeling 22 on Friday.
Thanks very much, Darius.
Thank you.
The World Health Organization has named Mpox a public health emergency of international concern for the second time. And as the CBC's Albert De La Talla explains, cases are skyrocketing in Africa as a new form of the virus begins spreading among children and adults.
It's the second time now that the World Health Organization has declared a public health emergency of international concern for Mpox. And it follows outbreaks in Congo and elsewhere in Africa, with cases seen among children, adults, in more than a dozen countries there. The symptoms of this condition, Mpox, which was known as monkeypox, known for causing painful, pus-filled lesions, also can cause severe illness or even death as well. It was first in the headlines a few years ago, the summer of 2022, after an explosion of illnesses then, and that's when the last public health emergency like this was declared by the WHO. That lasted about 10 months. The WHO says that in this current outbreak, the cases have actually exceeded the total number seen in all of last year. So they said about 14,000 cases so far as well, 524 deaths, they say.
The situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. The detection and rapid spread of a new clade of Mpox in eastern DRC, its detection in neighboring countries that had not previously reported Mpox, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying.
So the WHO says that it's working on the ground in affected countries with its partners there. It says it's supporting laboratories to sequence viral samples, training health workers, supporting clinicians to provide appropriate care, also supporting countries to access vaccines and helping them with rolling out those vaccines. Albert De La Talla, CBC News, Toronto.
Some Canadians with disabilities say they are unable to get treatment under Ottawa's new dental care plan. Marina von Stackelberg has that story.
We'll take a look, Bill, okay?
Nearly 500,000 Canadians have now seen a dentist thanks to the new National Dental Care Plan, aimed at helping Canadians that don't have private insurance, including those with disabilities.
Can I get my new tool?
Not Kevin Cunyu. After many years, doctors, and forms, he now qualifies for Ontario's Disability Support Program. But that's not good enough to apply for the new National Dental Care Plan.
I can't describe just how anxiety-inducing these processes are for people like myself.
Now Cunyu has to fill out a new round of applications because only people who receive the federal disability tax credit can get dental coverage. Ottawa estimates nearly 200,000 people with disabilities will qualify for dental care, but advocates say more than 1 million could be eligible.
They see it as the easiest list that they can have of disabled people that are severe and very severely disabled. But it's such a hard list to get onto.
The federal tax credit requires a new medical form to be filled out, even when someone has already proved their disability to their province.
The government can do better.
Requiring disabled Canadians to fill out all that extra paperwork is why critics say uptake of the tax credit itself is already so low.
It's one of the most burdensome application processes for any federal benefit.
Cunyu's dentist has told him the dental insurance he just started to get through Ontario's disability supports will only continue if he's rejected from the federal program. So for now, he has no dental coverage at all.
I think that the government should find a better way. This should not be the responsibility of people suffering from, sometimes debilitating conditions.
Canada's health minister says using the tax credit ensures fairness across the country, but acknowledges some people are being missed. He says many of them will be included once the program expands to cover all low and middle income Canadians next year. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
A group of Ottawa dog owners are teaching their pups survival and social skills. More on how they're doing after this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC is proud to be the exclusive media partner of the 36th Annual Vancouver Queer Film Festival, September 11th to the 22nd, featuring 97 films from 25 countries. For festival tickets, visit outonscreen.com/VQFF and never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
The summer has been a very good one if you love keeping your eyes on the sky.
The annual Perseid meteor shower hit its peak this past weekend, and solar activity has created some wonderful displays of the northern lights.
Now, as glorious as those sights can be down here on Earth, they really can't top the view astronauts get to enjoy from the International Space Station. That is nuts.
This is not fair. This incredible time lapse of the moon setting through the Aurora Borealis was captured by ISS flight engineer Matthew Dominic. The clip ends with a blazing sunrise reflecting off the space station.
No kidding. Very cool. Back here on Earth, not all dogs love water, if you can believe it, but some are bred for daring aquatic missions.
In Ottawa, a local group takes their canines to the water a few times a week to train in rescue simulations.
She has to go actually under the raft to get the ball.
So we just wait?
Yeah.
And like, what's it like when a 120-pound dog comes? Oh my God!
Sorry. Okay. All right, go back. Go under.
That's a good dog. Dog owners have been bringing their furry friends to the Ottawa River to practice in various scenarios. The Newfoundland dogs and one Labrador retriever swim out to haul boats and their owners back to shore.
There are 3 different training levels the dogs can achieve. The owners say it's a way for the animals to reconnect with their genetic roots and a great opportunity to socialize.
Have fun, learn a skill. Dogs with jobs. That's
Dogs
the
with
key.
jobs.
There you go.
And they look so cute doing it.
They do.
That's so much better than if I was trying to rescue somebody in a boat. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news here at 11 o'clock, right after the National. So please join her then. Good night.